Marcus Thompson had always been the class clown. Even at 32, he couldn't resist making jokes at the worst possible moments. His friends warned him that his mouth would get him into serious trouble one day, but Marcus never listened. He worked as a delivery driver and lived in a small apartment in downtown London, barely making ends meet. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Marcus was rushing to make his deliveries when he accidentally ran a red light. The police officer who pulled him over was having a bad day, and Marcus's sarcastic comments about protecting the streets from dangerous delivery guys didn't help his case. What should have been a simple traffic ticket turned into something much bigger when the officer discovered Marcus had 3 unpaid parking fines. 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself standing outside the Royal Courts of Justice. He had ignored the court summons twice, thinking it would just go away. His ex-girlfriend Sarah had begged him to take it seriously, but Marcus brushed off her concerns. "It's just some parking tickets," he told her. "What's the worst that could happen?" As he walked through the grand entrance of the courthouse, Marcus felt a mix of nervousness and defiance. The building was impressive with its tall columns and serious atmosphere. People in expensive suits walked past him, looking important and busy. Marcus looked down at his wrinkled shirt and old jeans, feeling out of place but refusing to show it. The waiting area was filled with people who looked worried and stressed. Some had lawyers with them. Others sat alone clutching papers and looking confused. Marcus sat in the back row, checking his phone and trying to appear casual. He noticed the Royal Guard standing at attention near the entrance. They wore their traditional red uniforms and tall black hats, standing perfectly still like statues. "Look at these guys," Marcus whispered to the man sitting next to him, "standing there like toy soldiers. Bet they've never had a real job in their lives." The man looked uncomfortable and moved to another seat. Marcus didn't care. He thought the whole thing was ridiculous. All this ceremony and tradition for what he considered minor traffic violations. When his name was finally called, Marcus walked into the courtroom with his hands in his pockets, looking around with obvious disinterest. The room was even more formal than he expected, with dark wood paneling and high ceilings. The judge sat behind an elevated desk, wearing the traditional white wig and black robes. Court officials moved quietly around the room, organizing papers and preparing for the day's cases. Marcus had no idea that his case was being heard in a special court session. Unknown to him, this particular courtroom was often used for cases involving public safety and civil order. The judge, Honorable Margaret Whitfield, was known for her strict approach to defendants who showed disrespect for the legal system. She had been on the bench for over 20 years and had seen every type of defendant imaginable. As Marcus approached the defendant's table, he noticed more Royal Guards positioned around the courtroom. This was standard procedure for certain types of hearings, but Marcus didn't know that. To him, it just seemed like more unnecessary pageantry. He slouched in his chair and looked around the room with a smirk, completely unaware that his attitude was already being noted by everyone present. The court clerk began reading the charges against him. 3 counts of failure to pay parking fines, 1 count of running a red light, and now an additional charge of failure to appear in court. As the clerk spoke, Marcus rolled his eyes and shook his head, making it clear he thought the whole thing was a waste of time. Judge Whitfield looked down at Marcus with a stern expression. She had read his file and knew about his previous brushes with the law. Nothing serious, but a pattern of disrespect for authority and rules. She also knew something that Marcus didn't know about himself, something that would change everything in just a few minutes. Marcus sat there, completely unaware that his life was about to take a dramatic turn. He had no idea that the Royal Guards he was about to mock had a connection to his own family history. He didn't know that his grandfather, whom he barely remembered, had once served with great honor in the same regiment. Most importantly, he had no clue that one of the guards standing silently in that courtroom was about to recognize something that would shock everyone present, including Marcus himself. Judge Whitfield called the court to order, and Marcus was asked to stand. He did so slowly, making a show of his reluctance. The formal atmosphere of the courtroom seemed to amuse him rather than intimidate him. As the judge began to speak about the seriousness of the charges, Marcus couldn't help himself. "Your Honor," he interrupted with a grin, "I have to say this whole setup is pretty impressive. All these guys in fancy uniforms just for some parking tickets." He gestured toward the Royal Guards. "I mean, what do these toy soldiers even do all day?" Stand around looking pretty? A collective gasp went through the courtroom. The judge's eyes widened in disbelief. Court officials stopped what they were doing and stared at Marcus. Even the other defendants waiting their turn looked shocked at his audacity. But Marcus was just getting started. Seriously, look at them, he continued, pointing directly at the guards, all dressed up like they're protecting the crown jewels or something. Must be nice to get paid for playing dress-up. I bet none of them have ever seen real action. Probably spend their days practicing how to stand still and look serious. The royal guards remained motionless, their faces showing no emotion despite the obvious disrespect. Their training had taught them to maintain composure no matter what happened around them. But inside their helmets, Marcus's words stung. These men had dedicated their lives to service and honor, and many had indeed seen real action in various conflicts around the world. Judge Whitfield's face grew red with anger. In her 20 years on the bench, she had never seen such blatant disrespect for the court and its traditions. "Mr. Thompson," she said sharply, "you will show respect in my courtroom or face additional charges for contempt of court." But Marcus was on a roll now, feeding off what he mistook for attention and amusement from some of the younger people in the gallery. "Oh, come on, Your Honor. We're all thinking it, right? All this ceremony and tradition, it's just for show. These guards are probably just regular guys who couldn't get real jobs, so they dress up and pretend to be important." One of the guards, a tall man with broad shoulders, shifted slightly. His nameplate read, "Guard Captain James Mitchell." Something about Marcus's voice had caught his attention, though he couldn't quite place what it was. The young man's features seemed familiar somehow, but Captain Mitchell couldn't figure out why. Marcus noticed the slight movement and pounced on it. "Oh, did I hit a nerve there, Captain?" he said, reading the nameplate. "Sorry if the truth hurts. But hey, at least you get to wear a cool hat, right?" Some people in the gallery actually chuckled, which only encouraged Marcus further. "Mr. Thompson, that is enough." Judge Whitfield slammed her gavel. "One more outburst and you will be held in contempt, do you understand me?" Marcus held up his hands in mock surrender. Sure. I'll try to control myself around the toy soldiers." He couldn't resist one last jab, and a few more people in the gallery laughed nervously. Captain Mitchell's mind was racing now. There was something about this young man that was triggering a memory. The shape of his face, the way he carried himself when he wasn't being deliberately disrespectful, even his laugh. It all seemed connected to something from long ago. He began studying Marcus more carefully, trying to place where he might have seen those features before. The prosecutor stood up to present the case against Marcus. She outlined his repeated violations, his failure to pay fines, and his obvious disregard for the law. As she spoke, Marcus made faces and rolled his eyes, clearly showing that he wasn't taking any of it seriously. "The defendant has shown a pattern of disrespect for authority and social responsibility," the prosecutor said. "His behavior today in this courtroom only confirms that he needs to face serious consequences to understand the importance of following the law." Marcus was asked if he had anything to say in his defense. He stood up with an exaggerated sigh. "Look, I'm sorry about the parking tickets, okay? I forgot to pay them. And yeah, maybe I shouldn't have run that red light, but all this drama over some minor traffic stuff? Come on, nobody got hurt. No harm, no foul." Judge Whitfield was not impressed. "Mr. Thompson, your attitude suggests you don't understand the seriousness of your actions. Ignoring court summons, failing to pay legal fines, and showing disrespect in court are not minor matters." As she spoke, Captain Mitchell was having flashes of memory. A photograph. An old man in uniform. A young boy who looked remarkably like the defendant standing before them. The pieces were starting to come together, but he needed to be sure before he acted. Marcus shrugged. "Whatever you say, Your Honor. Just tell me how much I owe so I can get out of here and get back to work." His casual attitude was making the situation worse with every word. The judge was preparing to deliver what would likely be a harsh sentence when Captain Mitchell made a decision that would change everything. He caught the eye of his fellow guard and made a subtle hand signal. Something important was happening, and he needed a moment to process what he was beginning to remember about this disrespectful young man who had no idea what was about to unfold. Captain Mitchell's mind traveled back 35 years to a small ceremony at the regimental headquarters. He remembered a proud old soldier named William Thompson, a decorated veteran who had served with distinction for over 2 decades. William had been receiving a special honor that day for his bravery during a peacekeeping mission. The memory was becoming clearer now. William Thompson had been Captain Mitchell's mentor when he first joined the Guard. The older man had taken the young recruit under his wing, teaching him not just about military protocol but about honor, duty, and what it truly meant to serve. William often spoke about his family, especially his young grandson who lived with his daughter after his son-in-law had abandoned them. "My grandson Marcus is a good boy," William used to say during their quiet moments. "A bit wild maybe, but he's got heart. Just needs someone to show him the right path." Captain Mitchell remembered the old soldier's eyes lighting up whenever he talked about the boy, and how proud he was of his grandson's quick wit and humor. As Captain Mitchell studied Marcus more closely, the resemblance became undeniable. The same strong jawline, the same bright eyes, even the same way of tilting his head when he was being defiant. This was William Thompson's grandson, though clearly the young man had no idea of his grandfather's legacy. The tragedy came flooding back to Captain Mitchell now. William Thompson had died suddenly of a heart attack when Marcus was only 12 years old. Captain Mitchell had attended the funeral, a small affair where he saw a confused and angry young boy who seemed lost without his grandfather's guidance. William's daughter, Marcus's mother, had been struggling financially and emotionally. The family had moved away shortly after the funeral, and Captain Mitchell had lost track of them. Now here was that same boy, grown into a man who was insulting everything his grandfather had stood for. Captain Mitchell felt a mix of sadness and responsibility. William had been like a father to him, and seeing his grandson like this felt like a personal failure. Judge Whitfield was growing impatient with Marcus's continued smirking and casual attitude. "Mr. Thompson, given your complete lack of remorse and your disrespectful behavior in this court, I am prepared to sentence you to 60 days in jail and a substantial fine." The courtroom fell silent. Even Marcus stopped smirking. 60 days in jail would cost him his job, his apartment, and what little stability he had managed to build in his life. For the first time since entering the courtroom, he looked genuinely worried. "Wait, what? 60 days? For parking tickets?" Marcus's voice had lost its confident edge. "Your Honor, I can't do 60 days. I'll lose my job. I'll lose everything." "Perhaps you should have considered that before showing such contempt for this court and its officers." Judge Whitfield replied coldly. "Your behavior today has been absolutely disgraceful." Captain Mitchell knew he had to act. The military protocol dictated that guards remain silent and motionless during court proceedings. But this was an extraordinary situation. He couldn't let William Thompson's grandson go to jail without knowing the truth about his heritage. The captain made a decision that could cost him his position. He stepped forward slightly, just enough to catch the judge's attention. Judge Whitfield noticed the movement and looked at him with surprise. Royal Guards never moved during proceedings unless there was an emergency. "Your Honor," Captain Mitchell said in a clear, respectful voice, "I request permission to address the court." The entire courtroom turned to stare at him. Marcus looked confused and slightly annoyed that one of the toy soldiers was interrupting his sentencing. Judge Whitfield was taken aback but intrigued. In all her years on the bench, she had never had a Royal Guard request to speak. "This is highly unusual, Captain." She paused, reading his nameplate. "Mitchell, what is the nature of your request?" Captain Mitchell's heart was pounding, but his voice remained steady. "Your Honor, I believe I have information relevant to the defendant that the court should hear before sentencing." Marcus rolled his eyes. "Oh, great. Now the toy soldier wants to join the party. What's next? Is the guy in the funny wig going to start singing?" Judge Whitfield slammed her gavel. "Mr. Thompson, one more word and I'll add contempt charges to your sentence." "Captain Mitchell, this is highly irregular, but given the seriousness of your request, I'll allow it. Please step forward." As Captain Mitchell walked toward the center of the courtroom, every eye was on him. His fellow guards remained at attention, though he could sense their surprise at his unprecedented action. Marcus watched with a mixture of curiosity and annoyance, still having no idea that his entire world was about to change. The captain reached the center of the courtroom and came to attention. His voice carried clearly through the silent room as he prepared to reveal information that would shock everyone present, especially the young man who had spent the morning mocking everything his grandfather had died protecting. Captain Mitchell stood at attention in the center of the courtroom, his voice clear and strong. "Your Honor, the defendant is Marcus Thompson, grandson of Sergeant Major William Thompson, who served with exceptional honor in Her Majesty's Guard for 22 years. Marcus felt like he had been punched in the stomach. His grandfather's name hung in the air like a thunderclap. He hadn't heard anyone speak about his grandfather in years, and hearing it from one of the guards he had just been mocking made his head spin. "I don't understand," Judge Whitfield said, looking between Captain Mitchell and Marcus. "How do you know this information, Captain?" "Sergeant Major Thompson was my mentor and friend for over 15 years, Captain Mitchell continued. "He saved my life during a peacekeeping mission in Northern Ireland. He was one of the most decorated soldiers in our regiment's history. He received the Military Cross for Valor, the Long Service and Good Conduct Medal, and was personally commended by 3 different commanding officers for his dedication to duty." Marcus's face had gone completely white. His legs felt weak and he gripped the defendant's table for support. Memories of his grandfather came flooding back, memories he had tried to bury after the old man's death. He remembered Sunday dinners where his grandfather would tell stories about his service, always emphasizing honor, duty, and respect for others. "Grandpa William," Marcus whispered, barely audible. His cocky attitude had completely evaporated, replaced by a look of confusion and growing shame. Captain Mitchell's voice continued, filled with emotion despite his military bearing. "Sergeant Major Thompson often spoke about his grandson Marcus. He was so proud of the boy's intelligence and spirit. He used to say that Marcus just needed guidance to channel his energy in the right direction. William Thompson died believing his grandson would grow up to be a man of honor." The courtroom was completely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, caught up in the unfolding drama. Judge Whitfield watched Marcus carefully, seeing the transformation taking place before her eyes. "When Marcus was 12, Captain Mitchell went on, his grandfather died suddenly of a heart attack. I attended the funeral. I saw a young boy who was lost and angry, who had just lost the most important person in his life. That boy is now standing before this court, having forgotten the lessons his grandfather tried to teach him." Marcus felt tears stinging his eyes. He remembered that funeral, remembered feeling completely alone and abandoned. His grandfather had been his hero, the one person who believed in him unconditionally. After William's death, Marcus's mother had struggled with depression and financial problems. They had moved away from everything familiar, and Marcus had gradually built walls around his heart to protect himself from further loss. "Captain Mitchell," Judge Whitfield said gently, "what was Sergeant Major Thompson's service record like?" "Exemplary, Your Honor. He enlisted at 18 and served with distinction until his retirement. During the Northern Ireland conflict, he personally rescued 3 wounded soldiers under heavy fire. He mentored dozens of young recruits, including myself. He was known throughout the regiment for his integrity, his compassion, and his unwavering commitment to protecting others." Captain Mitchell turned to look directly at Marcus. Sergeant Major Thompson used to carry a photograph of his grandson in his uniform pocket. He would show it to anyone who would listen, talking about how proud he was of Marcus's quick mind and good heart. He never lived to see his grandson become a man, but he died believing that Marcus would honor the Thompson family name. Marcus couldn't hold back the tears anymore. The weight of his grandfather's memory, combined with the shame of how he had behaved, crashed down on him all at once. He thought about all the times his grandfather had talked to him about treating people with respect, about standing up for what was right, about being a man of character. "I don't understand," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "How could you know all this? How could you remember him after all these years?" Captain Mitchell's own eyes were moist now. "Because, Marcus, your grandfather saved my life. During a riot in Belfast, I was trapped under debris from an explosion. I was unconscious and bleeding badly. Your grandfather crawled through gunfire to reach me, then carried me to safety on his back. The doctors said if he had been even 5 minutes later, I would have died." The emotional impact hit everyone in the courtroom. Several people were wiping their eyes, and even Judge Whitfield looked moved by the revelation. "After that day," Captain Mitchell continued, "William Thompson became like a father to me. My own father had died when I was young, and Sergeant Major Thompson filled that role. He taught me everything about being a soldier, but more importantly, he taught me about being a good man. I owe him my life, and I owe him my career. Everything I am today is because of your grandfather's courage and guidance." Marcus was sobbing now, 20 years of buried grief and regret pouring out of him. The cocky, disrespectful young man who had entered the courtroom was gone. replaced by someone who was finally facing the truth about himself and his family's legacy. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, his whole body shaking with emotion. The courtroom remained silent, everyone absorbing the weight of what they had just heard. Judge Whitfield, who had been prepared to deliver a harsh sentence just minutes earlier, now looked at Marcus with completely different eyes. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I knew my grandfather was in the military, but I was so young when he died. My mom never talked about it much after we moved. She was dealing with her own pain, and I guess I forgot. I forgot who he was and what he stood for." Captain Mitchell stepped closer to Marcus, his formal military bearing softening slightly. "Your grandfather never forgot you, Marcus. Even years after you moved away, he would ask other soldiers if they had any news about you and your mother. He worried about you constantly, especially after he learned about some of the trouble you got into as a teenager." Marcus looked up in surprise. He knew about that? William Thompson made it his business to know. He had friends in various police departments who would keep him informed. When you got arrested for vandalism at 16, he wanted to come get you himself, but your mother asked him to stay away. She thought his military discipline might be too harsh for you at that time. Fresh tears rolled down Marcus's face. "I remember that arrest. I was so angry and confused. I kept waiting for someone to come help me, but no one did. I thought no one cared." "Your grandfather cared deeply," Captain Mitchell said. "He respected your mother's wishes, but it broke his heart. He died wishing he could have done more to guide you through those difficult years." Judge Whitfield cleared her throat gently. "Captain Mitchell, this is extraordinary testimony. But I need to ask, why are you sharing this now? What do you hope to accomplish?" Captain Mitchell straightened back to attention. "Your Honor, I believe Sergeant Major Thompson would want his grandson to understand his legacy before facing the consequences of his actions. More importantly, I believe Marcus has the potential to honor his grandfather's memory if given the chance." Marcus looked around the courtroom, suddenly seeing everything differently. The guards he had mocked were not toy soldiers. They were men like his grandfather, dedicated to service and honor. The formal ceremonies and traditions he had laughed at were the same ones his grandfather had cherished and died protecting. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice steadier now, "I want to change my plea. I'm guilty of everything they said. I'm guilty of disrespecting this court, and I'm guilty of dishonoring my grandfather's memory. I have no excuse for my behavior." Judge Whitfield nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Thompson, your change of heart is noted. However, the charges against you are still serious, and your behavior in court today was completely unacceptable." "I know," Marcus said, "and I understand that I need to face the consequences. But if it's possible, I want to make this right somehow. I want to find a way to honor my grandfather instead of embarrassing his memory." Captain Mitchell spoke up again. "Your Honor, if I may suggest an alternative to incarceration, the Royal Guard has a community service program where civilian volunteers help maintain military memorials and assist with veteran outreach programs. Perhaps Mr. Thompson could serve his sentence by working with our Veterans Services Department." The suggestion sparked murmurs throughout the courtroom. It was an unusual proposal, but one that seemed to fit the extraordinary circumstances. Judge Whitfield considered the option carefully. "Captain Mitchell, would your unit be willing to supervise Mr. Thompson's community service? This would be a significant responsibility." "Yes, Your Honor, I would personally oversee his service. Sergeant Major Thompson saved my life. Supervising his grandson's rehabilitation would be an honor, not a burden." Marcus looked at Captain Mitchell with amazement. "You would do that for me? After how I treated you and your men today?" Captain Mitchell's expression was firm but kind. "I would do it for your grandfather, Marcus, and I would do it because I believe he saw something in you that's still there, buried under years of pain and anger." William Thompson was never wrong about people's character. Judge Whitfield spent several minutes reviewing the case files and considering her options. The courtroom waited in tense silence as she weighed justice against mercy, punishment against redemption. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Thompson, I am going to offer you a choice. You can serve the original sentence of 60 days in jail and pay the fines, or you can accept 6 months of supervised community service with the Royal Guard's Veterans Program, along with mandatory counseling sessions and full payment of all outstanding fines." Marcus didn't hesitate. "The community service, Your Honor. I choose the community service." Very well. But understand this, Mr. Thompson. This is not a lighter sentence. You will be working directly with veterans, many of whom have made sacrifices you can't imagine. You will be maintaining memorials dedicated to fallen soldiers, including those who served alongside your grandfather. If you fail to complete this service with the respect and dedication it deserves, you will serve the full jail sentence plus additional penalties. Marcus nodded solemnly. I understand, Your Honor. I won't let you down, and I won't let my grandfather's memory down again. As the judge finalized the paperwork, Marcus realized that his life had just taken a completely unexpected turn. An hour ago, he was a bitter young man making jokes about toy soldiers. Now he was about to begin a journey that would connect him to his grandfather's legacy and teach him what it truly meant to serve others. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same courtroom where his life had changed forever. But this time, he wore a clean-pressed shirt and tie. His hair was neatly trimmed, and his posture showed a confidence that came from purpose rather than arrogance. Captain Mitchell stood beside him, no longer as a silent guard but as a mentor and friend. Judge Whitfield reviewed the community service report with visible satisfaction. Mr. Thompson, Captain Mitchell's report indicates that you have completed 240 hours of community service, well above the required minimum. You've helped restore 3 military memorials, assisted at 5 veterans events, and personally mentored 2 young people who were facing similar legal troubles. Marcus nodded, feeling proud of his accomplishments but remaining humble. Your Honor, this experience has taught me more about myself and my family than I ever thought possible. Every hour of service has been a privilege, not a punishment. The transformation had not been easy. During his first week of community service, Marcus had struggled with the physical demands and the emotional weight of working with veterans. Many of the older soldiers had known his grandfather personally, and their stories about William Thompson's courage and kindness had both inspired and humbled him. Captain Mitchell had been patient but demanding, never letting Marcus take shortcuts or approach his duties with anything less than complete dedication. Your grandfather never did anything halfway, he would remind Marcus whenever the young man showed signs of his old casual attitude. The breakthrough had come during Marcus's 3rd week, when he met Harold Jenkins, a 78-year-old veteran who had served with his grandfather in Northern Ireland. Harold had been struggling with loneliness and health problems, and Marcus was assigned to help him with household tasks and transportation to medical appointments. Your grandfather saved my unit from an ambush, Harold had told Marcus during one of their trips to the doctor. We were surrounded and running out of ammunition. William Thompson crawled through enemy fire to call in support. 6 of us made it home that day because of his courage. That conversation had marked the moment when Marcus truly understood what his grandfather's service had meant. It wasn't about uniforms and ceremonies. It was about real people making real sacrifices to protect others. Judge Whitfield continued reading from the report. I also see that you've enrolled in college classes and have been accepted into a criminal justice program. What motivated this decision? Marcus smiled, thinking of all the conversations he'd had with Captain Mitchell and the veterans he'd worked with. Your Honor, I realize that I want to spend my life helping people instead of just thinking about myself. My grandfather dedicated his life to service, and I want to honor that legacy. I'm studying criminal justice because I want to work with young people who are making the same mistakes I made. Captain Mitchell stepped forward. Your Honor, if I may add something, Marcus has shown remarkable growth during these 6 months. He's become one of our most reliable volunteers, and several veterans have specifically requested to work with him on future projects. More importantly, he's helped 2 teenagers who were headed down the same path he was on. One of those teenagers, a 17-year-old named Jamie, was sitting in the gallery with his parents. Marcus had met him during a community outreach event and had seen his own angry younger self reflected in the boy's attitude. Through patient mentorship and shared activities, Marcus had helped Jamie turn his life around. The most important thing I've learned, Marcus continued, is that respect isn't something you give because you have to. It's something you give because you understand that everyone has a story and everyone deserves dignity. I spent years angry at the world, thinking everyone else was the problem. Working with these veterans showed me that real strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. Judge Whitfield nodded approvingly. Mr. Thompson, it's clear that you've not only completed your community service requirements, but have embraced the spirit of what this sentence was meant to accomplish. All your fines have been paid, Your service has been exemplary, and by all accounts, you've become a positive force in your community." She paused, looking at both Marcus and Captain Mitchell. "Captain Mitchell, your willingness to take responsibility for Mr. Thompson's rehabilitation has produced remarkable results. The court commends your dedication and the positive impact of your veterans program." "Thank you, Your Honor," Captain Mitchell replied. "But the real credit belongs to Marcus. He did the hard work of changing himself. I just provided guidance the same way Sergeant Major Thompson once guided me." Judge Whitfield officially closed Marcus's case, noting that all requirements had been met, and that his record would reflect his successful completion of the alternative sentencing program. As the proceedings ended, Marcus shook hands with the court officials and thanked Judge Whitfield for giving him a second chance. Outside the courthouse, Marcus and Captain Mitchell walked past the same royal guards who had witnessed his shameful behavior 6 months earlier. This time Marcus nodded respectfully to each guard, understanding now what their service represented. "So what's next?" Captain Mitchell asked as they reached the street. Marcus looked back at the courthouse, then toward the memorial where he had spent countless hours over the past months. "I want to keep volunteering with the Veterans Program while I'm in school, and I've been thinking about something else. I want to create a scholarship fund in my grandfather's name for young people who get in trouble with the law but want to turn their lives around." Captain Mitchell smiled proudly. "Your grandfather would be incredibly proud of the man you've become, Marcus. You've not only honored his memory, you've created your own legacy of service." As they walked away together, Marcus carried with him the lessons he had learned about honor, respect, and the power of second chances. He had entered that courtroom as a bitter young man, mocking everything his grandfather had stood for. He was leaving as someone who finally understood what it meant to serve others and make a positive difference in the world. The toy soldier had become his mentor. The grandfather he had forgotten had become his inspiration, and the court that could have destroyed his future had given him the chance to build something meaningful instead.